listening to AC/DC Beyond the Thunder, the podcast with the biggest balls of all. With your hosts, Kurt Squires and Greg Ferguson. It's time to rock.
It's time to power up another episode of AC/DC Beyond the Thunder. Hello again, listeners. This is the show where extraordinary fans get a chance to salute this extraordinary band called AC/DC. My name is Kurt Squires, and we've got Greg Ferguson riding shotgun over there alongside engineer Mr. Eric Kielb. Thanks for plugging in to part 2 of our episode with Mike Fraser, Canadian record producer, engineer, mixer, and essentially the 6th member of AC/DC. When we last left our hero during part 1 of our episode with Mike, we spent the entire time not only focusing on his recording career, which is astounding, but also his work on AC/DC's Razor's Edge, Ball Breaker, Stiff Upper Lip, Black Ice, Rock or Bust, and everything in between. So Mike, a warm welcome back to AC/DC Beyond the Thunder.
Howdy, boys, from Beyond the Thunder. How you doing?
We received such good feedback on your episode. I have to tell you, we left our listeners with a bit of a cliffhanger because at the time of our recording, which ultimately became part 1, we had no idea that Power Up, now AC/DC's 17th studio album, even existed. But believe us, we were trying to dig information out of you, man. And we knew something was brewing, but lo and behold, Mr. Fraser, you are tighter than a Phil Rudd drum kit. So we have to say, well done keeping your secrets to yourself and holding your cards close to your chest. I think even the AC/DC camp were getting a little nervous there for a while. So how does it feel not to have to keep a secret anymore?
Well, it's a bit of a weight off my chest for sure. But we had done this 2 years ago, so it's sort of been off my mind now. Once you finish the project, you move on to your next project, and then all of a sudden this record comes out, and it's like, oh yeah, right, that thing.
Well, and to throw our scent off even further, when we were talking with you, this is so brilliant what you did. I don't know if you remember this, but we wanted to play this unreleased clip from part 1 to give our listeners an idea of just how well Mike put up a smoke screen in order to keep things on the down low for us. Eric, can you play that for us? Yeah. Well, if you had to make a prediction about AC/DC, what would it be?
Well, I predict they're going to hang it up pretty soon.
Oh.
I know Angus wants to keep going, but,
he's the young guy.
He's retired now. Yeah. Brian's, said he's retired now. I think it's time to just, say, hey, we've done awesome, boys. Let's retire now.
Wow.
So that's my thought.
Smoke screen, man. You did it.
Takes the pressure off me anyways.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasant surprise following that interview with you to find out that you were just pulling the wool over our eyes. So now that the curtain has been lifted for part 2, we thought it would be a great idea to first discuss the making of Power Up. And then Greg had the great idea to have you field listener questions served up from fans around the globe. So does that sound like a plan?
Sounds great.
Well, we all know that 2020 has been a disaster of a year. That is until AC/DC released Power Up on, of all days, Friday the 13th, this past November. I have to tell you, Beyond the Thunder is a show about how this band has affected so many notable fans in unique ways. But here's an instance where AC/DC is there to lift us up, right? The music makes you feel good, fuels your soul. And for 40 minutes or so, after putting on this record that you engineered, I feel that the world has corrected itself.
Yeah. And it's great that it was towards the end of the year, like in November, because it's just been such a crappy year. And, everybody's spirits are going down and down and down. They come out with this record and it's just like, bang, it almost erased all that and put some joy back into the world. And it's great to hear a good new rock record come out. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of rock out there, and if anyone does it the best, it's AC/DC. So even the title alone, Power Up. So let's start there, I guess. How did that title come about?
You know what? All that stuff happens after we're done the record. Everything usually just has working titles. I don't think we even had a title or artwork or anything. But I'm only privy to stuff that happens in the studio. Anything they do behind the scenes, and that I have no idea. The same as you guys know about as much as you do.
I often wondered about that. Like, was there a whiteboard with title ideas and they get you involved? And like, I know some bands do that, but I didn't know if they were the type of band to do that.
Yeah, we usually have a erasable marker board up, and we put the songs and usually little squares of bass, drums, guitars, second guitars, vocals, background, and we kind of X them off as we get going. So it's kind of like a running progress chart. So come in the morning, you see what you got to do for the day. And, oh yeah, we got to get back to that song and put some backgrounds on, and just kind of keeps us on point and organized.
In August of 2018, you had mentioned it's been 2 years, unbelievably. You get the call to meet up in Vancouver. Miraculously, the most authentic version of AC/DC shows up right there in the studio in front of you. What's the first thing that you guys dive into?
You know what? I honestly don't remember. I remember walking into the studio, and I had no idea what we are going to walk into, what form of the band, because at that point, Brian was retired, Cliff was retired, Phil not sure what his status was going to be, and I walked in, and there's everybody there, the whole gang again, and it was probably a good hour of hugs and high fives, and
That's
it
great.
was wow, what a feeling to have everybody back together again and do another kick at the can. It was great.
That's incredible to me that you didn't even know until they showed up. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Is there ever an organized group meeting or a game plan to kick off a new album? Like, does Angus get up there in front of the boys and say, welcome back? Or maybe Brendan, like a pep talk or anything like that?
Not really. I'm sure Angus and the boys had many conversations, and that, like I've seen in some of their interviews now, I guess it all kind of the seed was planted during Mal's funeral when they were all together again. So I'm sure there's quite a few phone calls there. But, when we get into the studio, it kind of, okay, let's get down to business and let's get going,
Yeah.
because we're all kind of family. So it's, you don't need to sit and make any speeches or whatever. It's like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, roll up your sleeves. Let's get busy. And this is, for all intents and purposes, this is like, is this gonna work? These guys hadn't been together for a while, and Brian had some hearing issues, and Cliff had some issues, and Phil had some issues. So this is kind of like they probably were a little nervous themselves.
Probably a little bit, but again, they've been together for so long, and it's just a very comfortable, like it's a family reunion to get in, and we were wondering for sure what direction and where this was going to go, but you always knew it's like AC/DC, and they get together and everything's always great. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's nerves.
Let's talk about the first track, Realize, which is the second single released off Power Up. When we first dropped the needle on that thing, the production alone hits you like a Mike Tyson uppercut, man. This, just there's got some reverb on Brian's vocals. It's got thunderstruck like chants. There's melodic Angus guitar fills, and it sounds anthemic. It's big in your face, groovy. There's a lot of layers going on in that thing.
Well, I've got to give full credit to it, to Brendan and Angus. They were really the workhorses on this record. I was there engineering and everything, but all the production, all the stuff and the ideas, that was all Brendan and Angus for sure.
My second thought was, what in the world would this song sound like if it were stripped down and placed on an album like Flick of the Switch? Which obviously you have the ability to do that. But the sonic quality of these new songs is immense. It's like night and day.
Oh, wow. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Angus mentioned Realize was one of the first songs he and Malcolm wanted to go back into the well to salvage from the Black Ice sessions. What was your reaction to kicking off the album with this tune?
Each tune was kind of individual. Like we would come in and I can't remember even if we started, Realize was the first one we started recording, but we would sort of dive in at, sort of 3 of the songs at a time, sort of finish them all up with guitars and everything. And then Brendan and Brian would kind of disappear and go put vocals on. I'd get the vocal tracks back into my session and go, oh, wow, that's where it's going, because sometimes you can't really tell with just bass and drums and a few guitars on it, on how it is. So, you don't ever have any perception of how each song's going to end up until you get to the end, so it's almost a little bit of a surprise as you keep going along. And you don't ever have any sort of preconceived ideas. Like, I remember when we were doing Thunderstruck, that was just another good song in the bunch that we were doing for that record, and had no idea that it was going to turn out to be one of their anthemic songs down the road. So we're just in there doing our job, and hopefully at the end of the race, everything turns out good.
Right. For those of you who haven't heard part 1 of Mike's episode, you should check that out, because he goes in great depth about Thunderstruck and the recording of that song, which you mentioned your probably legacy of an AC/DC song. Would you concur with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's right up there with The Highway to Hell and Back in Black and, all those classic anthems.
Greg and I actually, we have real jobs, and we do a lot of producing and directing and editing TV commercials. And when we're editing, we come up with probably, 20 different versions of an ad sometimes. Does that happen with an AC/DC song?
Well, these guys have always kind of done their records kind of live off the floor. So there's not really too many directions. Though, again, I would say that, with Brendan and Angus would work through a song and some of Angus's ideas and riffs, and they'd build it into a song form, so that then when we go out on the floor with the whole band, everybody's got an idea of what the song's going to be. So while they're going through it, maybe there were a few twists and turns and try this, try that. But, once we got the song together, they want that live band feel. So it's pretty together when we go to cut it on the floor.
But there's no like Mike Fraser version of Shot in the Dark, let's say.
No, you wouldn't want to hear that.
Speaking of Shot in the Dark, we got a glimpse of the new AC/DC single, which was released a month before Power Up came out. After the album was recorded, would you have bet that was their lead-off single after hearing all of them together?
Again, I'm not any judge of that. Like, to me, any of the songs could have been. And, with not knowing what the album was called and how the artwork and how it was all going to be presented, you don't know which direction all the powers to be want to take it. So I had no idea what the first one was going to be.
Okay. So you didn't have a favorite in your mind that you said, you know what, they should probably lead with that. That's a good one.
No, and I think all the records I've done with them, there's never been a clear first runner, other than maybe Play Ball was one that you heard, say, okay, that one's going to be a single, for sure. It just had that radio quality or whatever, and sports teams are going to grab that up or whatever, so you knew that one was going to be a leader. But all the other records, all the songs are really strong and really good, so it's like it could be any direction, anyone could lead it,
Yeah. And to not have Brian singing the chorus was pretty radical for the band on Shot in the Dark, right?
Yeah. Well, again, that's Brendan's brilliance.
Yeah. That was a Brendan idea?
Yeah.
Yeah. The one change up for I think most fans is Through the Mists of Time. That's like a wow departure. Not only as a song title, but the song itself. What was your first reaction when you heard that song?
Well, that song, it's very melancholy. So, and I think I could speak for most of us out there, is that, when you hear that song, you just go right to thinking about Mal. And, perhaps it was the tip of the hat to Mal on that one. It's very I saw somebody had put together one of those unofficial videos or whatever with the song, and it was all old shots of them and through the mist of time. And, you know, it kind of makes you tear up a little bit.
On Power Up, more than anything else, we really noticed the attention to detail on the backing vocals. Assuming Brendan had a big role in that, but there were some woo-hoos and some ahas and some oh no's. And I was like, whoa, this is different for AC/DC. Some poppy hooks in there.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've always, on this one, you know, Brendan wanted to get some more of the sort of from their past records, how some of them had sort of more gangy vocals and stuff like that. And on all their past records, Mal always sang on it, and he's got such a distinctive voice. So we got Angus in there singing on that because very, very similar voices. And I tell you, on some of those, I could swear it's Malcolm singing. You know, it's
Wow.
like, it's really, really cool how we did that.
Wow. I bet there was a lot of those kind of feelings in the studio. And especially like you said, it's a family atmosphere. Angus's wife was still doing all the cooking, was she?
Yeah. Ella was there and lifting spirits and keeping us fed and, you know, feeding us healthy and making nice little, you know, smoothies and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's a great vibe having her there.
Wow. That's quite a marriage. That's been like 40 years. That's one of those rock and roll marriages that have lasted. It's just very, very cool to hear. You know, the lyrics are much more thoughtful, I thought, with Angus this time around. Does he show up with scraps of paper hanging out of his back pocket, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, he's got a big book of stuff and I guess lyrics and idea, whatever, and he'll flip through the book, and, you know, him and Brendan will sit there, and then Brendan says, well, you know, we need a different chorus or something. So Angus will go off to a room by himself and hammer something else out and bring it back up to Brendan, and they'll give it a try with Brian. And, you know, I think it comes together pretty quickly. There may be points where they need to change a word or a phrase or something like that. But it's quite cool looking through the book. He's got all his ideas all the way back to, you know, Highway to Hell and before that. So it's kind of neat seeing the kind of wrinkled up pages from back in the heyday, you know, so it's cool.
Oh my God, someone needs to scan those pages before he loses it at the airport or something, you know?
Yeah. No, he's got it pretty safe, locked up in his stuff.
Good. You know, my personal favorite off Power Up is Wild Reputation. Honestly, can't tell you why. It just has a similar Power Age Gone Shooting kind of groove to it that is on repeat in my house. And I love the sound of Phil's hi-hat that you got and the snare. And I was just wondering, does Phil ever like lean over and say, hey, mate, can you turn up my drums just a little bit louder?
No, because, you know, once we've got everything tracked, though this record was a little different because, like I said, we sort of attacked three or four songs at a time. But once sort of all the drumming's done, then Phil went home. So everybody else stayed because we needed Cliff in there. But usually once their parts are done, they want to get home to the family, you know. Yeah, so that makes sense. Phil was just there for the drumming and none of the mixing or anything like that.
Well, what's your thoughts on Wild Reputation? I'm just curious if your memories of that tune.
Well, I like the swagger. I like the swagger of the song. Like it's just got a cool thing to it. And, you know, one of the, I guess, sort of a surprising thing to me, you know, once we sort of finished the whole record was that a lot of the songs seem to span other records, you know. A lot of their songs, you know, are similar and the same, and they keep reinventing themselves with the same, you know, bunch of chords and all that. But on this record, like you say, some of it you can go back to the, you know, Stiff Upper Lip, you know, different eras you could pick out and say, oh yeah, that would fit on really good on that record. So, you know, once we're done the record, then I start musing, saying, oh, I wonder if that song was from the pile of stuff Mal and Angus did during X record or whatever, you know, because I know Angus has got quite a pile of ideas and stuff. And I know some of the songs were going to get worked up for record. And I saw Angus said in an interview that, you know, Mal says, now we'll do that one later kind of thing. So, yeah, you know, they could have been done in those eras, and that's why they've got the flavor to them. But it's quite neat because it's it makes for a bit of a different record. So it's just not all sort of this is from this era. It's got a little bit more of a historical reference to it for a new record.
It does. It does. Even a track like Demon Fire, it's a blistering rocker, sort of a sister track. I bet it was from the days of Safe in New York City. It sounds like a sister track to that, or Caught with Your Pants Down, or something like that. That same little riff. So I get it that they just pull them out of the pile. You know what I noticed there? I didn't know if you had anything to do with this. Angus has a little guitar lick in that track where it almost sounds like you put a Dick Dale pipeline echo effect on his guitar. Do you remember that little piece?
Not specifically, but I know while he's doing his leads, we like to put a little bit of a slappy life thing to it so that he can play along to it. And, it just feels a little bit sort of more rock and roll and less rock. It doesn't have the big long echoes and all that. It's always got a little short, tight little Chuck Berry thing or something,
Yes. We had talked to Brent Hines from Mastodon on Beyond the Thunder. We haven't released the episode yet, but he had followed AC/DC in the studio after they'd worked on Black Ice with Brendan. And he wanted details from Brendan about their recording process because he's such a fan. And Brendan told him there was one track that Cliff had a particularly tricky time nailing a bass line on for Black Ice, but which is kind of fun to hear. Everyone goes through that and then in the studio, of course, but were there any moments on Power Up where there was a definite hurdle for one of the members to nail?
You know what? I think every song had its trickiness. Like in particular, like Cliff kicks ass all the time, but back, I forget what year or what record that was. He had an accident and severed all his tendons in his left hand, I guess it is.
That was right before Black Ice.
Yeah. And then I think that's why that record was delayed, because they waited for Cliff to kind of get through rehab and see what was going on. So he comes back, but I think there's a finger or maybe two fingers that he can't put any, muscle pressure on. So to play the bass is,
oh my God,
is really difficult. But you wouldn't know, you forget all about that. And, there'd be something says, we missed a note there or something. He goes, he says, yeah, I know. He says, just really having problems pushing that down. But, he powered through it. And there might have been a few little things we got to go in and fix up like that. But, it was all great. Like everybody played great, especially for nobody knew the song until, the sort of the completed idea would come down and sort of run through it a couple of times and okay, go, So, obviously in the first couple of takes there's some mistakes and people forgetting, oh shoot, yeah, that's the chorus or whatever. But, it gets ironed out really fast because, those guys are so used to playing together that, they can kind of get their cues with just an eye glance at each other or whatever. So
that's amazing. Do you and Brendan ever go back to the Mutt Lange trilogy of AC/DC albums to use that as a benchmark for sound because they're sonically just amazing? Or are you like, nope, this is my own thing. I got my own sound going?
Yeah, we just kind of do our own thing. I don't think in any of our minds we ever refer back to any of their old stuff, Power Age or anything. This is now, this is what we're doing. There might be a point where we'll be doing something down and then one of us or somebody would say, oh yeah, that's a lot like, we did in blah, blah, blah. And sometimes you'd make an effort to say, well, let's not repeat ourselves then, you want it new sounding and, what's past is past. I think, Mal and Angus both have always said.
Right. So the album is completed and you guys you've gone your separate ways. How much did you get to tinker on your own, even before going to LA to work on the touch-ups and stuff? Is that something that you play around with and surprise the guys with a few ideas?
Nope. No, it's, it's done. When we were done, we packed up all the gear, packed up the tapes, got them safely on their way to LA. I think we might have had a week off and flew down to LA and then got right back to work, mixing.
Okay. All right. So what was that, like a couple of months process from start to finish?
I think I was down there maybe 4 weeks.
Okay.
And then I came home, and I think Brendan and Angus went in and did a couple little fix-ups of things that weren't quite right or They wanted to remix a section or a bit of the song. So they did that on their own rather than fly me all the way down there again. So they might have been another month, maybe a couple weeks going through stuff. And, yeah.
Well, have you talked to any of the boys or even Brendan since Power Up has come out to, relish in all of its success? It's number one in multiple countries and the fastest selling album of 2020. It's pretty amazing.
I just was kind of reading that this morning because, I've kind of been under the hood the last 2 weeks and saw something in my feed come up and it was like number one in the 8 countries. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Yeah. That's great. I haven't talked to anybody. Brian and I usually swap emails fairly often, but I haven't talked to them since the records come out. I know they've been busy doing interviews and doing all their stuff. I've been busy, so we haven't talked yet, no.
Well, I have to say the record company did a killer job on all the marketing and promotional material, and they've made a lot of money off of me. I know that in 1 week. I'm a big fan. So, did they ever send you anything? Like, did you get any swag or anything like that? Or even an album?
Nothing yet, but it's brand new and I got to buy it at the show.
Oh, right. Yeah. God, I hope they go on tour. This is killing us all. So before we get into these questions, Mike, thanks for talking about Power Up. That was fun. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Power Up, or to the fans or to the guys, since you haven't talked to them, just to relish in its success?
Well, it's just, to me, it's amazing seeing on some of the AC/DC fan sites the absolute love of this record and of the band. And it's just really exciting to see because, when you're in there working, and I know with the band, their fans are always first and foremost in their mind, but you have no idea how the record's going to be received and whatnot. And it's just like, it's been overwhelming seeing the love and respect that the fans have for the band. And, part of that too is that it's like, oh, you've saved 2020 and all that, but it's just really overwhelming and really, really awesome to see. I'm very happy for the band and proud of the job they've done on this record.
And for yourself too. You're a part of it. You're part of the AC/DC family, so take some credit there.
Thanks, man.
Just before we get into the questions, I wanted to ask, if you were to frame 5 albums in your house from any band that you're most proud of that you've worked on, what would those bands be?
Wow, that's a tough one. God, there's so many of them. There's the AC/DC. I love working with the Metallica guys. Aerosmith is definitely up there because they were the ones that kind of believed in me first and gave me my first shot. So that's right. They were way up there. The Cult was really fun to work with. Blue Murder, Dan Reed. There's a bunch of them. That's probably my 6.
Yeah, that's great. Right off the top of your head, that's not too bad. And it does go on and on. I mean, even the story with Jimmy Page is pretty incredible. Producing Jimmy Page, that's awesome. Okay, Mike, so we're now going to pass the mic over to my partner in crime, Greg Ferguson, and we're both going to alternate a speed round of listener questions sent in from AC/DC Beyond the Thunder fans from around the globe. So, and remember, Mike, keep your answers in the form of a question. Just kidding. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, we got some great questions from our listeners. So thanks to all of them for sending them in. We'll try to get to most of them. The first couple are very technical questions, which is kind of cool. I think some people really want to geek out and know the inner workings and maybe some of the secrets that you kind of hold there. The first one is from Jens from Stuttgart, Germany. And he wants to know, out of the amps, the microphones, and just the gear in general, is that chosen by the band, or how much of it is up to you, Mike?
Well, the band brings their gear. Like over the years, like with Malcolm and Angus, they used to bring truckloads of amp heads and cabinets. And over the years, we'd shoot out each one and each combination. Let's try head A into cabinet D and all that. We'd shoot it all out. We'd always kind of come down to, there was 2 heads and 2 cabinets for Mal, 2 or 3 heads for Angus, and a couple of cabinets. So the last bunch of records we've done, they've only brought those. Like, why bring everything? And it always gets the same answer. So it's always been kind of the same heads and same cabinets. And same with Cliff. Cliff has just got his SVT and a couple of basses that he uses. So the gears always comes from the band. Then we always shoot out the heads again, and when we position the mics, we find a sweet spot in the speakers and stuff. So that's me. That's down to me. I'm there to capture the sound that's coming out of the speakers out in the studio, and capture it on tape. So I guess it's a team effort, but yeah, the band are responsible kind of for their sound, and I help them get their sound, basically.
Cool. I think you kind of answered this next question a little bit. This is from Elliot Henderson from Durban, UK. He wants to know particularly what microphones were used on the guitar cabs, and also what impact does the choice of mic and the placement have on their sound?
Well, I always use, for any guitar that I record, mostly, 90% is a Shure 57 and a 421 mic. I also sometimes use a C414 as a bit of a room mic or a little off-axis mic to kind of add a little bit of the room depth to the sound. And then the microphone placements are quite critical. I usually have my assistant run out with the big set of headphones on because it's so loud out there, and he'll sit there and move the mic along in front of the speaker and all over the place, and we'll just, okay, hold it right there and check it out. And so it takes a bit of time to get the mics placed right. Like, I just don't go out and just kind of throw them up. No, let's try that. Like, we spend some time getting the mics in the right spots.
Do those change throughout the session, or do you kind of, once you get it locked in, that's how it's going to go for that whole session?
Once we get them locked in, that's the best spot for that cabinet. The only time we'll change things up is when we start doing lead guitars. We'll quite often use a separate cabinet and head, and then we'll change the mics up according to what we're wanting, because sometimes you want a little bit more of a sort of a phasey kind of sound, like the mics be a little bit hollow. So what you have to do is put them a little more off axis. Instead of getting that direct sound, it's more of a wider sound. So we play around with them a little more during leads, but for rhythms, once they're set, they're set.
All right, Mike, this one comes from Rob Outram from North Wales. Rob says, I have no question. I would just like to say what a fantastic job done, Mike. The engineering and mix sounds absolutely fantastic on Shot in the Dark, and Cliff's bass is thundering through. That was a question.
Rob.
And then S. Steve from Massachusetts asks, are there any songs off Power Up that changed drastically from formation to final product?
That one I don't really know, because most of them I don't know what the original idea riff that Angus him and Mel had. So as far as I know, each song, once it got formed into a song thing and I heard them, it didn't really change. Though for me, it changed as each layer went on, and especially once the vocals and the vocal melody comes on, the song kind of changes what you maybe thought it was. But, when you just hear bass, drums, and guitars without a melody, it could be anything. And then a melody goes on, and then the song kind of, that's what it's doing, So but as far as the formation of the song, no, it's all pretty much the same once we start tracking it.
Okay.
So I got the next one, Mike, here. This one comes in from Kel Way from Nashville, Tennessee. His question is, you've worked with 4 different producers on AC/DC albums. What is the main thing each one brought to the table that made that respective album that much better?
Each producer has their way of interacting and working with the band, and each one was pretty different. And it's sort of bizarre that I'm the sort of common thread through there. It all ends up the same. Like, AC/DC don't really need a producer. They know what they're doing, and they do some really kick-ass stuff. But they want sort of the third ear, making sure they're on point and pushing them to do it better, and then maybe even suggest changes in the song, like, hey, how about if we change the key? How about if we sing it like this? They're not making the song for the band, they're helping them get there. So each guy had his own different way of doing it, a way that it's all similar. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it totally does. The next question is from Maya from Toronto. We already know, Mike, that you're pretty good at keeping secrets. It's probably just part of the job for you. But she wants to know, with AC/DC being such a tight-lipped band, what's the closest that you've come to slipping up and letting the world know that the boys were back in business?
I think there's been a few of them, especially on this one, because
it's got to be hard to keep the secret. Yeah.
Well, it is, especially, like I'm a pretty honest, straightforward person. So when I'm asked a direct question, it's pretty hard to say nothing, so.
Unless it's with us.
I try to either steer you away from it, or, I guess the no comment is standard, but, I get into a nice conversation with some nice people, and it's just really hard to kind of, oops, I guess I shouldn't have said that.
Sometimes you get yourself in trouble, I'm sure.
Yeah, so this next listener wants to know about the Wrigley show.
I don't know anything about that. Next question.
Okay, this one is from Andrew D., Wales, UK. Hi, Mike. Is there a reason Angus's solos are very short nowadays?
I don't know, other than... especially in the last couple records, they've kind of trimmed the songs down a bit. Like, we don't get the big, long 6-minute songs anymore. So, when the songs are all streamlined and no fat on them anymore, there's just room for just rips a quick solo off, and then let's get back to the singing or the chorus. So, I don't think there's any reason. It's just how it just turned out.
Yeah, I noticed that trend in the 2000s of solos kind of either getting trimmed or even taken out. There was this great scene in Some Kind of Monster where the band is talking about getting rid of solos, and Kirk Hammett just loses his shit. I don't think so, guys, but that was a good question. Jesus from Spain and Clint Summers from Iowa asked similar questions, kind of combined them. Which is the song off Power Up after mixing? You said, these boys are awesome. And did you have a favorite moment at that time that you remember most?
Now, that's a tough one, because on this record, a lot of the songs I think are great. I guess a personal favorite for me was Miss the Time. It just makes me feel closer to Mal again or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
That one's pretty special.
Very emotional, for sure.
All right. Well, next question is from GCat from Atlanta. GCat wants to know, how do you get the rhythm guitar so loud on both sides? They're at the same volume as the stereo value, and it sounds awesome. A compliment in there for you.
Right on. Thank you. The AC/DC, ever since I've started working with them, their idea of their guitars is just one tracked guitar. Nothing's double tracked. So Mal will be on one side, Angus is on the other. So less is always more. So when there's less of the guitars, you can get them louder in the mix. As soon as you start doubling them up, they're so loud and thick that sure, they're nice big wide sound, but then they're back. So if there's only one guitar, you could just turn it up. It's pretty simple, really, but their sound is complicated, even though it's simple. It's the same as their, songwriting and the way their songs are. They sound simple, but it isn't. Just try playing one and you'll know.
Just try playing them. That's what they say. All right. Next question is from Francisco from Argentina. And question is, Power Up has a more historical AC/DC sound. But the last few albums, have a more compressed sound compared to the previous releases. With Power Up, was this a feel thing, or was this a pursued sound?
Each record we go in to do, like I've said before, we just go in to do them, and there's no sort of plan and perceived idea, and let's make this one this way. It's just whatever comes out during that process. It's a team of people working on this, and we just put in our 100%, and then when the dust and smoke clears at the end, we'd look at what we got. So it's not really a perceived thing, Again, Brandon was driving this thing and is the, big part of this. So, maybe he had something in the back of his mind, but it wasn't, we never speak about that. We just do the best we can, and let's make that, and let's make that guitar loud, and let's get that on Brian, and, and away we go. And each record has its own thing, I guess.
Okay. This is from Jim, New South Wales, Australia. I heard Angus once talk about how Malcolm would sometimes point out during recording that the guitar chords between he and Angus would contain notes that would clash. And even though Angus would not hear it straight away, he would eventually, like a week later, he'd be in awe of Malcolm's attention to detail. Can you please describe that attention to detail and the importance it plays in achieving that magic harmonious sound between the Gibson and the Gretsch?
Yeah, that would be more of a Mal and Angus question. When they were in the studio working together, I've seen that come down, and Mal says, "Hey, Ang, what are you playing over that?" He goes, "Oh yeah, no, I'm doing this. Maybe try." He'd do a few suggestions like that, but I think they worked that stuff out more while they're writing the songs. So I wasn't really privy to many of those.
I think it's a brother thing, right? They're just connected.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
All right, a few more questions here.
Yeah, this is from Michael from Charlotte. Michael's question is a great one, actually, and it's all about the approach that Angus takes to creating new music. He wants to know: does Angus have his solos kind of planned out beforehand, or is this something that he just improvises and works on, on the moment?
I think it's just all at the moment and off the cuff. He just gets out there. We crank the speakers loud, and he just turns on his guitar and he just goes. And sometimes we'll do maybe 5 or 6 passes on the solo, and each pass will be something different. So it's I don't know where he gets that from. It's just this natural ability that comes down through him and into his hand. But he's pretty awesome at it.
Have you ever been like one take and then we got it, let's move on?
Oh, for sure. Lots of times, but we don't move on. We just say, that's it. We've got it. Let's try another one just to see if it's even better, So it's hard to just do one take because we're having a blast in there too. We just want to see him do it again.
Yeah, that's got to be an amazing sight to see, for sure. Well, maybe you can just kind of talk about, how the team is assembled and how is, start with you as the engineer and who else is in the room with you, and how are the producers chosen for each album?
With the production, I'm not sure. I do know that they really enjoyed working with Bruce on the first record, and then Bruce died before we did the next record together. So they got Rick Rubin, which started out as being a great combination. I thought, because Rick's a lot of his records he's done, he's always tried to emulate AC/DC. And that was, kind of a tumultuous thing. And I think I went into a little bit of that in the first part one.
Yeah.
And then I know they got George in and pulled him out of retirement because, George is George, their older brother. And they wanted somebody, sort of more like what Bruce did. And I guess Bruce and George were fairly similar in things. So not that I was privy to those decisions, but, I can guess on. As far as their relationship with Brendan, I don't know how that started and all that, but I think it's been a really good, fruitful one. Brendan is really talented. He's a musician himself, so he's able to, suggest maybe not chords, but hey, let's do this to get to there or whatever. Like he's a pretty integral part of putting these records together for sure. And then, I guess I just lucked out getting in there in the early days. And again, I'm always surprised that I'm sort of the constant factor. They've changed producers a few times, but I'm still there. But maybe because, I'm pretty easygoing. We're kind of like family. So that's kind of it.
Perhaps you are the secret ingredient, Mike.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think I just make them laugh, and then they say, let's get that Fraser guy in again. He's funny.
Well, here's our last question of the day from Chiyo, Tokyo, Japan. Do you ever have any crazy fans show up and distract the band while recording, or famous ones who just want to hang out in the studio with AC/DC?
I do know there's sort of a certain group of them that'll show up every day with a big giant armful of records to get signed, which the band will sign them. And then the next day is the same guy with another armful, and they just tell him to hit the road because, basically he's just getting them signed to sell them on eBay. And they hate that. They love fans. They don't like the scammers. Yeah. So
Right.
I know that really bothered them, especially this last record. There's a lot of the scammers. And then that whole business with the telephoto across the thing with the roof and pictures of them that haven't smoked really pissed them off.
Yeah, I bet.
One, they're trying to do a surprise record for the fans and keep it all under wrap. And two, just leave us alone while we're doing this,
Yeah.
Like, they're a very approachable band. You see them walking in the street or the restaurant, they don't mind saying, oh, hi, and all that. But, when we're working on that, and we put up some barricades, and these people were trying to get around the barricades, getting pictures. And it's like, just leave us alone. It was just irritating. Like I say, this band loves their fans and does everything they can for them. They just ask for a little bit of privacy at certain times,
Sure. How about any famous musicians or actors or whoever just want to show up and hang?
No, it's business time in the studio with this band. And, if you've noticed too, at all their live shows, they don't really have any guest appearances come up and jam with them or whatever. The only time I can think of is, when they played with the Stones, and I think it was them that jumped up and jammed with the Stones.
I was there in Toronto when that was awesome. They played Rock Me Baby from B.B. King.
Yeah, right on.
Well, that's it. AC/DC Beyond the Thunder listeners, a valiant job putting Mr. Fraser on the spot. And Mike, we can't express enough how much we've enjoyed your extended participation in parts 1 and part 2 of this podcast series.
Thank you, guys. You always make it really easy, and I don't feel too much like I'm on the hot seat. Maybe a couple of questions here and there.
Not anymore. The cat's out of the bag now, right?
About anything.
Yeah, right. So it's easy to see why AC/DC and so many other bands keep coming back to you album after album, and not just for your production acumen, but just you're a great guy. So thanks again for doing this.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah.
If you were ever to star in a James Bond film, I think it would be called The Man with the Golden Ears.
What's that? Beer?
Out of curiosity, Mike, since you've seen this formula firsthand being created right in the lab, can you describe this phenomenon called AC/DC, since Beyond the Thunder is really about how it's influenced so many people, and how has it affected your life? How has AC/DC affected you?
Oh, in a huge way. Like, when I first saw them back in maybe 78 or something, and I think, again, I told you that in my first episode, I was like, who are these guys? Oh, these guys are great. And so they've gotten all their stuff they've ever done. So, actually get to work with them has just been a bonus. But, I think the thing with these guys is they're just a blue collar band, t-shirts, and they don't have any sort of airs or rock starness about them. They're very honest. They write and play what they enjoy playing, and hopefully the fans like it too. So they're never trying to pretend there's something not. What they are is what they are, and they're freaking awesome at it.
Well, Mike, awesome. Well said. We always end the show with the final question of, if you had to sum up AC/DC in one word, Mike Fraser, what would that word be?
Power up.
AC/DC Beyond the Thunder theme song, Trailer Trash, written and performed by Gannon Arnold. VO talent by Bruce Jacobson. Cinematography and sound recording by Greg Ferguson. Edited and mixed by Eric Keel. Written, directed, and hosted by Kurt Squires. Produced by Greg Ferguson, Eric Keel, and Kurt Squires. AC/DC Beyond the Thunder is a Squires LLC current motion production. Copyright Beyond the Thunder podcast. All rights reserved. This has been a Nat Attack presentation. Shazbot. Nanu Nanu.